Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why, even with all our modern therapy and mindfulness practices, we still struggle with this really deep feeling of mindness that seems to color everything we experience? This new study dives into an ancient philosophy to offer some fascinating insights. Basically, scientists and therapists are realizing that a lot of the great work we do in therapy, like helping people manage their thoughts or emotions, might be kind of like rearranging the furniture in a room without actually fixing the foundation of the house. They've noticed that people can get really good at focusing their attention and stepping back from their thoughts. But this deeper sense of this is me or this is mine doesn't always budge. This is where a concept from ancient Indian Buddhist philosophy called Yogācāra comes in. The researchers in this paper took this ancient idea and built a model like a mental map with 5 layers. Think of it like this. Layer 1 is your raw senses, just taking in information. Layer 2 is your thinking and reasoning, where you make sense of things. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Layer 3 is what they call background self-grasping. This is that constant underlying process that tags everything as mine, even when you are not consciously thinking about yourself. Layer 4 is like a deep storage or a generative field for all your habits and tendencies. And layer 5 is what happens when these deeper layers are transformed. They had 3 main ideas emerge from this framework. First, they zeroed in on this 7th consciousness, which they call manas or layer 3. They propose this is a distinct background layer responsible for creating that sense of self-appropriation or mindness. This helps explain why focusing only on our thoughts and reasoning layer 2 might have a limit. They call this level-blindness. Basically, if you are only looking at the surface, you can't see the deeper operating system. Second, they reimagined the 8th consciousness, layer 4, which they call leya vijna. Instead of seeing it as just a filing cabinet for memories, they suggest it is more like a dynamic field that is constantly generating and shaping our experiences. This helps us understand why the same situation can lead to very different reactions in different people, and how deep patterns can change over time. And third, they introduced a concept called raya parvtai. This is like a third horizon for change, going beyond just managing symptoms or accepting things as they are. It points towards a deeper transformation of the basic operating system, especially that background self-grasping. So, what does this mean for us? The researchers aren't saying we should ditch our current therapies or mindfulness practices. Instead, they're offering a way to understand why sometimes these practices hit a plateau. They suggest that if we're only working on layer 2, our thoughts and reasoning, we might be missing the deeper influence of layer 3, that constant self-appropriation. Think of it this way: if you are trying to fix a broken appliance, you might be able to clean it up and make it look good on the outside, but if the wiring is faulty, it is not going to function perfectly. This Yogācāra framework suggests that the faulty wiring might be layer 3. The paper really dives into this idea of manas, or layer 3. In traditional Yogācāra philosophy, manas is described as always working, always deliberating, and it is constantly associated with views like there is a self and ignorance about no self. The researchers translate this into modern psychology by saying it's not about specific thoughts like, I am not good enough, but the underlying process that tags any experience as mine. This process isn't something we can easily observe directly with introspection because it is the very filter through which we observe. This constant background self-appropriation is what they believe can remain intact even when we become really good at mindfulness and decentering. Decentering, for example, is a great skill where you can observe your thoughts without getting totally caught up in them. But if layer 3 is still subtly coloring your observation, you are still observing from a fundamentally self-appropriated standpoint. They also describe 4 self-grasping operational biases of this manas layer. One is a threat monitoring bias. This layer constantly scans information for threats to our sense of self. If something feels threatening, it gets priority, which can actually make us experience more of what we fear. It is like when you are really worried about something, you start noticing signs of it everywhere, reinforcing the fear. Another bias is identity congruence. This means we tend to favor information that fits with our current story about ourselves and push away anything that contradicts it. This is how we build and maintain our self-narrative, reinforcing what we already believe about who we are. Then there is the avoidance amplification cycle. When we try to avoid something, say a difficult emotion, we paradoxically have to keep paying attention to it to make sure it is gone. This sustained attention actually strengthens the very thing we're trying to avoid, creating a loop. Finally, a temporal projection bias bias, manas can project our current sense of self onto the past and future, making us feel like our life is predetermined. It is that feeling of, I am just this kind of person, things will never change for me. This is where the idea of the Laya Vijna, layer 4, as a dynamic generative field becomes really important. It is not just a passive storage unit. Instead, it is a constantly flowing field that influences what arises in our awareness. When we try to avoid something, for example, that avoidance action affects this field, making that very thing more likely to arise in the future. It's more like a landscape that gets carved by the flow of water than a warehouse with separate items. This also means that memory isn't just retrieving something from the past, it is more about how these latent patterns manifest in the present moment. Interestingly, there is a connection to neuroscience here. The default mode network in the brain, which is active when we're not focused on a specific task and tends to be involved in self-referential thought, might be related to these deeper layers. The researchers suggest that parts of this network could correspond to the self, grasping operations of layer 3 and the dynamic field of layer 4. This is a really exciting area for future research to see how these philosophical concepts might map onto brain activity. So, this concept of Raya Parti, the transformation of the basis, offers a potential path forward. It is not about a sudden flash of insight or a quick fix. Instead, it suggests that real deep change involves the gradual loosening of that background self-grasping. By working with these deeper layers, we might open up new possibilities for psychological transformation. Now, it is important to remember this is a theoretical paper. They've built a conceptual model based on ancient texts and modern psychology, but it hasn't been directly tested in a lab with 1,000 participants. They even admit this limitation themselves. They've also made some interpretive choices in translating the ancient concepts, which is natural when bridging different traditions. And the neuroscience connections are described as structural analogies rather than direct matches. What I find so compelling about this research is how it bridges ancient wisdom with modern science to address a really persistent human experience. It gives us a language to talk about that subtle, often unconscious process of self-appropriation that can limit our growth even when we're doing all the right things with our mindfulness and therapy. It suggests that maybe true freedom involves not just managing our thoughts, but fundamentally shifting how we relate to our entire experience, moving from a constantly mind perspective to something more open and less bound. It is a complex idea, for sure, and it opens up a lot of avenues for future research. How can we develop better tools to measure this background self? Grasping, can specific therapeutic interventions be designed to target layer 3 more directly? And how exactly do these deeper shifts manifest in the brain? These are all really important questions that this paper helps us to ask. What are your thoughts on this idea of a deeper layer of self-grasping? Does it resonate with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to Rubin's Mind Lab and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into fascinating research. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.